Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go!
Hello everyone, welcome to this month's bonus video. This is for January 2022. This is the video where I list 20 items that I think are interesting, innovative, unusual, sometimes valuable, sometimes just fun, but we get to talk about them in greater depth, and I want to thank my Level 2 members for making this extra content possible. If you are a Level 2 member, you are seeing this as it goes live, or at least you can be. The Level 2 members get first access to these items. I have 20 items that will be listing on eBay, and the listings will drop as the video drops. If you're not a Level 2 member, you might want to consider joining so that you get first access to these items. You can hit the join button or look in the description for more details about memberships. We do eventually release this content to everybody because we do want everybody to benefit from the knowledge and information that we're able to share. If you are interested in any of these things, you can go to eBay. If they are currently listed and they haven't sold right away, then you can either buy them now or bid at auction. All of these items go on auction. This is part of a grand experiment that I like to do because I like to see how the eBay market for these items at a particular given point in time is. I typically don't promote these listings, so what we see is just what is the current eBay auction market for this type of item. And I think we've got some interesting things this month, so let me start showing you. Our first item goes all the way back to 1876, and that is because it was from the First World's Fair in the United States. This is a memorial of the International Exhibition of 1876. And this was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the First World's Fair. It was held at what is now Fairmount Park. It is a nice little booklet with views from the fair. We'll get this to come in. There we go. It's also got a nice little bird stamp from William McMillan, who wanted us to know that he went to the World's Fair and got it. He also stamped it inside the back cover where they have the dimensions and cost of the principal buildings. One of the interesting ones is the Women's Pavilion, which cost $40,000. First, they weren't going to do a Women's Pavilion, and a lot of women, especially because this was the time of the rise of the suffragettes and the temperance movement, and the women were not excited about being excluded, so they were granted a pavilion, but they had to raise $30,000 of the $40,000 themselves in order to build it. We have nice pictures of the various buildings in here, the main building, the horticultural hall. I believe the women's pavilion is in here. Let's see if we can find that. It was about all sorts of things to do with industry. So here is the women's pavilion. There was a pavilion devoted to just shoes and leather and the work that went into those. There was one that was for the state of Pennsylvania. There was one from England. The Tudor-looking grouping there is the English Commission. So countries around the world participated. It was a beautiful fair. The Fairmount Park area is adjacent to Lemon Hill, where a lot of the early historical homes that you can still tour to this day are in Philadelphia. And Fairmount Park is only second to Central Park in New York in terms of size and stature. It was an important thing because in Philadelphia in the 1830s and 40s, as the city grew, there wasn't any open space for people, and so they started cavorting in cemeteries on weekends because it was the only place with green space, so the city realized it needed a park of some sort. Some of the states participated. In addition to Pennsylvania, we have Connecticut and Massachusetts here. So it was a full-fledged World's Fair. This little booklet is neat. The spine is cracked, but it's a good intact copy. I'm starting it at $10. I think they usually sell for about twice that. So we will see what the market is for this particular item. This next piece goes back even a little further. You can see it's just got a very slight amount of fraying on the edge, but this is a lovely felted case. And you think, well, what's in this little case? Well, we open up the hasp and we see it is a daguerreotype. And you can see the woman seated there for the picture. Let's get it out of the light where you can actually see the image a little better. I'm going to see if I can bring that forward to you. Now, if she was wearing a really outrageous dress or hat or jewelry, she'd be worth even more. But she's in good shape. You can see the image. Daguerre was the Frenchman who came up with the first stable photography printing method, and it had to do with using silver salts to print, and the plates are glass. And so a lot of times they would fade with time. She's actually a pretty strong image. You can see her well, and you can see all of her, and that makes a difference. I like the little case. It's not exactly a union case. It's like a little felt booklet instead, and the hasp is in good shape there, as you see. This particular piece, again, I'm starting fairly inexpensive. I am starting it at $19.99. I do believe the value is probably in the $50 range. It is a 6th plate, which means the size. A big plate was 6 times this size, so this is a 1/6 plate, which means it is 2 3/4 inches by 3 1/4 inches. Our next offering is this darling little family of penguins, and there they are. We'll reverse them so you can kind of see them as I saw them when I found them, nestled together. These are by Royal Doulton, but they are so little, they're about 1.5 and 2 inches tall, that they really only had room to put Doulton made in England on the bottom. So that is how they are marked. Doulton made in England. They are nicely done. It's all hand painting, of course. These are just really sweet. Now, penguins are a motif we don't really see a lot until the mid-20th century because, of course, there wasn't a lot of exploration of the South Pole until the late 19th and really early 20th century. But once there is, penguins become a very collectible item, and they just have such a sweetness about them. This particular family is part of a long line of artware from Royal Doulton that started in 1860. Royal Doulton is still being produced. It is actually owned by the Fiskars company that makes scissors out of Finland now, believe it or not. A lot of the English china is owned by them. But Royal Doulton is a very storied name in ceramics. The porcelain is really well done. The details are really, even on a little piece like this, are just very, very meticulous. And so I think they're very cute. I'm starting them at $35. It is possible they could go for as high as 2 or 3 times that, and we shall see what the market thinks, but they're definitely appropriate for winter. Now, next up is this little box purse, and I just think these are so much fun. This is Enid Collins, and this is earlier Enid Collins. You can see down here where it says EC in the corner. If they are marked EC or Enid Collins as opposed to Collins of Texas, it means they were made before 1970. And this one actually tells us exactly when it's made. It wasn't used very much, so the hasp is in really good shape. And when we open it up, we'll have to turn it around. There's the mirror. Copyright 1967 Enid Collins. Mirror could use a little bit of a cleaning. I've done nothing to this. It's just exactly the way I found it. But I was very happy to find it because it is in really good condition. Very, very little wear, and particularly the wooden box purses in the black, they typically do have a lot more wear than this. So the fact that it's in this clean condition, I thought really made a difference. There's no graying or loss of color to the rhinestones. These big flat rhinestones, the flat backs here, because of the way they were glued on, can lose their color, and that's very detrimental to the look and the value of these. So this one's in really good shape. Enid Collins and her husband started making things in the late 50s because they bought a ranch in Texas, and they thought ranching was going to be their way to make a living and raise their family. And when they got to Texas, they found out ranching is really difficult. But her husband had worked as a machinist in the auto industry in Detroit, and she had gone to an art college, and so she had all sorts of artistic bent. They tried at first to make things like belts and sandals and sell those. And then she hit on the idea of the purses. Her husband actually gets credit for the bejeweling. He was the one who said, oh yeah, we can find a way to make the process work for that. And ultimately they started by buying boxes, and then he said, no, we've got to make our own because they needed a more steady and regular supply. So he is a lot of the credit behind that part of it, but it was definitely Enid who had the name and who made the connection with the customers. They started doing the purses in 1959. They were a big hit because they were flashy and fun and very much of the era. I know these are flowers because it says Mille Fleurs, which is one of their more popular patterns here, but look how they've got these Sputnik-y designs. It's very space age, it's very glam, it's very 1960s, and the condition is really good on this. And so that's the reason that we're starting this at $49. It could go for as much as double that. These are very popular now. Well, I think I'm going to have to model this next piece because it fits me fairly well, even though it was considered an extra large in 1980 when it was made. It's a little big on me, but it is actually probably what we would consider a large now. And you can tell by the stripes and this elastic in the sleeves that this is definitely from 1980. And if that wasn't enough, we know because it is from the World Series of 1980. This was distributed by Pepsi Cola, and this one is called a Swingster, made in America, because clothing was still being made in America at that point. This is from before Velcro is widespread, so you see snap buttons instead. Lots of piping, the stripes around the collar. This is very, very typical of late 1970s and early 1980s clothing design, particularly sportswear. And the 1980 World Series was very significant. The Philadelphia Phillies and Mike Schmidt, their big star, beat the Kansas City Royals 4-2. The 6th game was the most watched baseball game in history. 55 million people tuned in to see the Philadelphia Phillies win that championship. So it is a nostalgia piece. This was given to a fellow who worked for Pepsi Cola, who was one of the sponsors, and that's why you see Pepsi Cola on the front here. And he wore it exactly once at the game during an appearance, and that's it. So it hung in his closet ever since, and we got it to bring to you. So it is minty fresh, no wear, no damage of any sort. You can see the label in here, I believe, that says Swingster World of Wearables. This one is starting at $30, and we will see where the market takes it from there. Now, people keep asking me, what things do you think from the late 70s and the 1980s are going to be collectible? Now that that's 40 to 50 years ago, we really have to consider that that is the new era of collecting. And one of the companies that I'm very excited about is a ceramics company out of California called Jaru. And I have a Jaru piece to show you now. Also very popular in the late 1970s and early 1980s was the concept of the geodesic dome. People built them as houses. The Tacoma Dome, which is a 24,000-seat arena in Tacoma, Washington, built a geodesic dome out of wood. Well, this is essentially a geodesic dome made out of ceramics, and it comes in a big plexiglass carrying case as a display item. This is how this would have been displayed originally when it was made in 1976. I'm going to set it down here and take the lid off so that I can show you. Here it is without the lid. This is absolutely based on the R. Buckminster Fuller design for the geodesic dome. And it is absolutely similar to the geodesic dome used for the IMAX Theater at the 1986 World's Fair in Vancouver, BC, Canada. But this was made by Jaru. Jaru was a good company that made interesting modernist ceramics. They were based in California. Jaru, J-A-R-U, stands for Jack and Ruth Hirsch, who were the founders and creators at the pottery. But they got a lot of help from a fellow named Victor Hauser. Victor Hauser had worked for Bauer Pottery, and he came to work for them after Bauer Pottery closed in 1962. And he brought a lot of glaze technology with him, and that's why they were able to make these very thick, in this case, metallic glaze, which is not an easy thing to do. You see copyright Jaru 1976, and then 160 is the mold number there. I can tell that my fingerprints on it are actually smudging it, so I'll have to clean it off again. That's why it's under a plastic dome, I suppose, is because that is what will keep the thing from getting touched a lot. It's very much a sculptural piece, and I think it's just really neat. And I like the fact that it's presented in the manner that they would have presented this back in that time with this case. It is absolutely gold, 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 and of course brass and gold tones are coming back into decorating style now, so I think it's a very timely moment to have this piece for sale. I'm curious to see how it will do. I got it when I was shopping at the flea market in Florida with the Nurse Flipper, and I got the feeling that it had been there unnoticed for a long time because it had a very faded tag on a high shelf. So I am starting this at $99, and we'll see what the market thinks of that. But I know a lot of Jaru pieces are selling for well into the 3 digits these days, and people really do like the metallic glazes because they were not easy to do and they're not common. The next item I have is an American flag. There's lots of people who fly the flag proudly, and there's lots of people who like to collect flags. This one is collectible for a particular reason, and that is if you count the number of stars. This is a 46-star flag. The 46th state was Oklahoma in 1907, and in 1912, Arizona and New Mexico joined, and that made us the 48 states, and the flag remained at 48 stars for a long period of time, until 1959 when Alaska and Hawaii were admitted. So the 46-star flag only lasted for about 5 years. It's not terribly common. This one's about 14 inches by 10 inches in size. It's a nice silk material. If you are paying attention to the news these days, you may have heard that something called the Enabling Clause has turned out to be very important in Oklahoma recently. The Enabling Clause in 1907 was passed to allow Oklahoma, which was the western part of the state, and the Indian Territory, which was the eastern part of the state, to be admitted as one state. And part of the agreement was that the Native American tribes would have jurisdiction over the half of the state that had been the Indian Territory. That was quickly abandoned and forgotten, and as a result, a recent lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court was decided in favor of the Native American tribes, saying that they have jurisdiction over the legal affairs of the eastern part of the state, including the major city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and some other fairly large metropolitan areas now. That's caused a lot of consternation with some folks, although it seems a little bit misplaced because they have arrangements with the regular state police for law enforcement and that sort of thing. But the fact that they now have control over the jurisdiction means that Oklahoma's in the news again, as it was in 1907 when this flag would have come out. So because it's a relatively scarce number of stars, I expect that this will sell somewhere in the $25 to $50 range. Next up, we have another item related to Pepsi Cola, but this one is a really neat cigarette lighter, and it is in practically mint condition. I don't think it was ever used. It has the name Rosen Nessor on it, which is a Japanese company. They're trying to make it sound like Ronson, notice that. But it has never had a flint in it. It's got the original wick. It's never been used. On the back it says the light refreshment. We know from the shape and style of this lighter and the fact that it was made in Japan that it would have been made sometime around 1960. We also know that because Pepsi Cola's bottle cap logo in the mid-50s was changed from having 2 dots between Pepsi and Cola to 1 dot. So the one dot is an intermediate logo before they came up with their modern logo in 1973. The original reason Pepsi was called that is it was promoted as a stomach cure for dyspepsia, hence Pepsi Cola. Pepsi Cola didn't do very well. It went bankrupt in the 1920s, and the only reason it was saved is because there was a candy company that had soda fountains that could not get Coca-Cola to give them a better deal on syrup. And so they decided to buy Pepsi Cola and sell it at their candy stores instead. Pepsi Cola then in 1934 did a really smart thing, and there's an old jingle that I don't remember, but older folks do, and that is, Pepsi Cola hits the spot. 12 big ounces, that's a lot. And what they were talking about was that in 1934, they decided, because it was the Depression, that they would put out 12-ounce bottles for a nickel, whereas before you could only get a 6.5-ounce bottle for a nickel. So because of that, a lot of people switched to Pepsi and never went back to Coca-Cola and the others. By the 1950s, it was being called the light refreshment, and that's the reason for this on the back here. It's in great shape, no corrosion, no staining, no scuffing, no scratches. It's in just really great condition. The other thing significant with Pepsi Cola is that they were one of the first to have celebrity product endorsement. Barney Oldfield, the race car driver back in 1909, was quoted as saying that he drank Pepsi Cola before his races so that he would stay alert and have his faculties with him throughout the race. And that was the beginning of a string of celebrity endorsements, which probably peaked with Michael Jackson in the early 1980s, whose hair was actually burned while he was filming a Pepsi commercial. This is going to start at $29. It could sell for as much as $50 if the right people see it. Our next piece here is this beautiful bowl. I'm going to try to stand out of the way so that you can get a little better look at it. We have lots of reflection from light here, and I have to say that the light makes it seem just a little more lavender. It's really a little more of a blue color, I think, than what you're seeing. But it's a very pretty bowl by a company named Holmgard, which is the main glass-making company in Denmark. And Holmgard was known for this Provence style, which was developed by a fellow named Per Lutken, and he was the primary director of their art glass until his death in 1998. There is a small etched signature on the bottom, right about where my thumb is, that says Holmgard, and then that little signature there underneath is the Per Lutken monogram, and then below that is a stock number. They still make this piece. It sells for 150 euros, which is close to $200. I suspect this might be as valuable, but it's been in the line for years and years. And this particular one harkens back to the 1970s, and I know that because I'm selling it for a woman named Tova, who's from Denmark, who brought it with her, but now she's downsized and did not have room for this large piece because it is 11 inches in diameter. So it's a nice big console bowl. Per Lutken was known as being a very difficult person to work for by his glassblowers because he insisted that the pieces have very good quality and real weight. So this rim is actually quite a bit heavier than the rest of the piece, and that was hard to do. It was hard to control the glass flow in that manner. So it wasn't a piece that the people making this really loved to do, but it was a piece that the people getting it really liked and prized because of that aspect of it. And so that's part of why they're expensive, is because they're not the easiest thing to make. I think this one is really pretty. It's going to start at $100, and we will see how close it gets to that new price that you would have to pay if you ordered it from Holmgard today. Now, I typically save the most expensive piece that I'm showing for the very last. But the last set of items that I want to show today have a story behind them, so I decided to put the most expensive piece right in the middle. This is item number 10, and this is a flag. And it's not even wildly old. Why, it's not even Etsy vintage, meaning it's less than 20 years old, but look at what it is and you'll see why it's collectible. This is a flag that was flown at the 2006 Masters Golf Tournament and then signed by all of the participants in the golf tournament in 2006. And what a great group of golfers this is. If you're a golf fan, Gary Player, his name is there, Vijay Singh, Tom Watson is there. The two in the middle are two of the more important, which are Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. If it just had their signatures, it would be worth somewhere in the $1,500 range. But there's one other signature there that makes it even more significant, and that is right there. That is Tiger Woods. And the fact that it has Tiger Woods' signature plus all of these other signatures means that this flag and flags like it can sell for as much as $4,500. It is really, really collectible. The signatures are all genuine, and that is going to be the interesting thing putting it on eBay. A lot of people who put these online do it using a grading service where they send it off and they have a certificate of authenticity put with it. However, I know the provenance of this piece. So rather than sending it off and spending the $200 it takes to get this done and then have it sent back and wait for 3 months, because we're helping someone sell this for an estate, we decided to go ahead and try it now with the provenance we have. The provenance we have is that it was owned by a personal friend of ours who lived at PGA Golf Course in Florida, went to the Masters tournament, met these guys, bought the signed piece. He went to the 2006 Masters. We know he was there. We just absolutely 100% can stand behind this because of its provenance. And so our hope is that we'll be able to sell it the way it is. We're going to start it, believe it or not, at $2,499, which is the least expensive that we've seen one of these sell. So we are going to give it a try as it is. If it does not sell, we will then take it and have it sent and spend the money and take the time to have a certificate of authenticity done for it because we know it's authentic. So we know there's not going to be an issue with that. We just would like to sell it without having to go through all of that. There's the mark on the back when he bought it, autographed 2006 Masters flag. And I mean, this was not cheap when he got it either. These things are expensive. That's why they're so valuable on the secondary market. I'm very excited to see what Julian, the bearded thrift machine who helps Nurse Flipper on her live broadcasts, has to say about this because he's a real golf guy. And I'm not sure if he's actually seen one of these before. Now, this next guy is just so cute. And I say guy, but it could be a girl. We're not really sure. We do know this. It is a critter. At least that's what people call them now. They are referred to as Robert Maxwell critters when you go to list them online. And so that is how we are going to list it. There's the Robert Maxwell signature. Robert Maxwell was a very famous studio potter in California. He set up shop right across from the Ames brothers when they had their studio in Venice, California, selling their furniture and modernist designs. And he started doing the ceramics about 1960. Well, in the mid-60s, he came up with these, and his name for them were you-name-ems. They even had a book about you-name-ems, and they showed them in little different guises with little sayings. They all have these very startled expressions, sometimes happy, sometimes not sure what's going on. I just think they're very, very cute, and they are very collectible now. Robert Maxwell's designs went on to great fame because he ended up doing the initial designs for Pottery Craft, the company I wrote the book on. And unfortunately, his association with Pottery Craft did not work out well. He ended up leaving the firm after just a few months and going back and establishing his own studio again. And he was still producing as recently as 5 years ago. I'm not sure if he's still with us. I believe he is. When I interviewed him for the Pottery Craft book, he really wanted to talk more about the things that he had made over the years, and I can see why, because these are just so cute and people really love them, and they're good quality stoneware. I just think they're so much fun. The designs are really great. I love that nose. It's nice to see something with a nose bigger than mine. So this is a cute little guy. He's only about 5 inches from nose to tail, and he is going to start at $49 because these typically sell nowadays for as much as $75 to $100. Our next item up for bid is more soda fountain stuff, but this one is Dr. Pepper. I know I've got a Dr. Pepper fan in my community who I talk to a lot, and here is the Dr. Pepper bottle. There we go. This one is special because it says it salutes the 1972 world champion Miami Dolphins, and look at that record. 17 wins, 0 losses, 0 ties. They had the only perfect season in NFL football history. Did not lose a single game. They show the Orange Bowl on the back. That's where the Dolphin would swim back and forth in the pool in the end zone. And they show their 1972 season record. The perfect season, as they called it, was very significant for a number of reasons, partly being that in the 5th game, their quarterback got injured and had to be replaced for almost the rest of the season and well into the playoffs. And the backup quarterback got them all the way to the playoffs without losing a single game. So it was quite remarkable that they managed to win Super Bowl, as you see there, 7 over the Redskins, and not lose a single game in the process. Dr. Pepper put these out because they were one of the sponsors of the Miami Dolphins in 1972. And it was when they were just starting to do these painted bottles. I mean, truthfully, nowadays, every team, every event, almost any reason you can think of, they make a special bottle for it. And those bottles are worth $5 to $10 typically. In 1972, this was a new concept, and they really only distributed them in the Miami area. So to find one, especially with the original contents, which will be a joy to ship, but we'll make it work, is not an easy thing to do. And because of that, these sell typically for around $75 on eBay. So I'm curious to see how this one will do. The Dolphins did not have a perfect season this year and are not in the playoffs, but there is a chance with football season just wrapping up now that there are fans out there looking for these, and we're going to find out. Our next item is sporting related in a different way, and that's because it is a picture of these 2 young bodybuilders on a real photo postcard. And there's our picture. We're going to show you the back. It's a real photo postcard because it was a real photo turned into a postcard. And there you go. And it says it is Henry Buck, and I think that's supposed to say neighbor doin'? I can't quite tell who the other fellow is. This is going to date to about 1920. Now, obviously, the photographer in the studio, and you can tell this was done in a studio because the background is one of those sort of airbrushed backgrounds that's kind of fuzzy. You can tell that the photographer posed them because he wanted to make sure they showed the arms and the physique, and that was the idea behind it. It was a much more innocent time then than now. Nowadays, when we go to list something like this, we put gay interest in the header because a lot of people look at this, and particularly because of the positioning of the hands, which is a little suspect, they think differently of these kind of photos than they did when they were taken. And so because of this, we expect that this particular card will sell for a fairly good price. I'm actually expecting to start at around $25 to $30 and see what the market does from there. This is Victorian mourning jewelry. All of this is real hair, and notice that they did different braiding as they went along. So somebody was very meticulous with this. Now, they call it mourning jewelry because hair jewelry and things using human hair are considered oftentimes to have been in remembrance of someone who was gone. The truth is, with this particular piece, I suspect this was made out of a woman's hair, and then she bought the fittings to make a watch chain out of it and probably gave it to her husband to carry as a remembrance of her. It would really maybe be more sensible if we called this remembrance jewelry, because it wasn't always because someone died. But mourning jewelry, as they call it, was called that because when Prince Albert died in England and the American Civil War took place, there were a whole lot of people who were in mourning, and as a result, anything made of hair or other things that were reminiscent of the person or came from the person became very prized, and that was a big movement in jewelry in the Victorian period. The fittings appear to be gold-filled to me. I don't think, because you can see some tarnish on this hook here, that they would be solid gold in any way. I have not tested them. There is a chance I could be wrong about that, but if it is gold, it would be a very low carat weight. But I do see evidence of tarnish, and tarnish tells us that it's not some form of solid gold, but they are really nicely done. You can see the delicacy of the design on the fittings, and here is the part that would hook to the button slip in a pocket, and the watch would go on the other end. So someone would wear this inside of his vest and then open it up to take a look at the watch. I just think these are really cool. I haven't had one for sale before. I don't really come into this sort of hair jewelry very often. I think it's a really neat piece. I expect to start this at a price somewhere in the vicinity of $50. They can sell for as much as double that, and we will see how this one does. My next item, again, is World's Fair related. I am a fan of World's Fairs and World's Fair collectibles, and one of the first I started collecting was the Chicago World's Fair of 1933 to 34. Now, this particular ticket stub is from the 1934 season. It was such a popular fair that at 50 cents a head, they had millions of people go through, and they ran it for 2 seasons instead of 1. You can see where it was the stub torn off on the side here. These are pretty common, but the reason I'm putting this online is because this person got to go on closing day. And this is not so common. This is October 31st, Halloween of 1934. This was the last day of the Chicago World's Fair. It had run for 2 years. This is a certificate of attendance. So if you went on that particular day, they would give you this to put in your pocket as a remembrance. And if you didn't wipe your ink pen on it, or crumple it, or drop it, or lose it somewhere, then you could take it home. So there really were only so many of those made. So the combination of these two is what I think makes it interesting, and they came from the same collection, so I thought we would leave them together. I'm of the opinion, because these are actually pretty hard to find, that they could sell for $30 or $35 for the set, most of the value being in this one. I'm starting them at $10, so we will see what the World Fair's collectors think. I do have one more piece of glass to show, and I think this one's a real beauty, and it's a little different than a lot of the glass that I find and what you might expect. This, which has a Grecian design on it with the woman with the staff and the flowing dress, is made of glass, believe it or not. All of this detail is painted and fired onto the glass. This castellation around the top, the woman who, I'll put her up close where you can see the really great detail in her hair, her dress. She has her tambourine. She looks like she's ready to have a great time. And even this bottom part in the brown is painted on. It's a shape and a style that is roughly reminiscent of amphora vases from the classical era. And I'm sure that's what they were going for when they made this, but the surprising thing about it is made of black amethyst glass. Black amethyst glass was very popular in the late 20s and 1930s, and it looks black as can be, but if you shine a really bright light through it, you find out that it's actually a very deep purple. And this one's also interesting because of where it came from. You can see the etched mark at the top of the rim there, Czechoslovakia. And You also can see this has a lot of wear because this dates back something like approximately 90 years now. This is enamel paint that is put on, so it's got a little bit of texture when you touch it. It has the design on the front only. It's in really great shape. It's not scratched. It's not blemished in any way. I just thought it was a really unusual check glass face. Definitely not like the very fun but much more common and typical colored spatter glass faces that we see from Czechoslovakia in this time. This is really attempting to be more of a piece of artware rather than just a production piece. So because of that, I think it's rather interesting. I'm starting it at only $19, but I really believe that the retail value on this could be north of $50 somewhere, and I'm curious to see what people on eBay think of it, because I think it's rather a stunner. It is approximately 9.5 inches tall as well, so it's fairly substantial. And it's got a nice wide mouth, so you could really arrange flowers in it well. Now I have a couple more books to show. This first one here is called Safe Counsel, and this came out of the estate sale I conducted recently in Florida. I did let other people have a chance at it, and I ended up taking it after it didn't sell the first 2 days because I thought it was really interesting and fun. It's a little imperfect. It does have a blemish here. Also, the spine is cracked, which I will show you by opening to the middle here where you can see, but it is an intact reading copy, but you can see the gap there. So it's something that will need to be treated with a reasonable amount of care, but it's got great graphics, and the subject of the book is what makes it the most interesting to me. You can see somebody at a later time, probably the 19-teens or 20s, put an ex libris label in the front. But this particular book, which came out in 1895, here is the searchlight on the World's Fair, so that's the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. And it says light on dark corners, because this book is trying to give light to things that might not be talked about in polite society, because it is essentially, as it says here, a complete sexual science, a guide to purity and physical manhood with advice to maiden, wife, and mother. So this is printed in Naperville, Illinois, which was a little town then. Now it's a big suburb of Chicago. And the whole idea about this was to give you ways to understand how to be a devoted mother, what to do for home amusements, and why the house was such an important place to go. But it also tells you interesting things like what is a blackhead and how to deal with flesh worms. Wonderful subject. It also says when and whom to marry. And that's very important because, you know, we need to be told not to just jump into the first thing that we see. Do we get married in puberty? Why, no, we wait. This one is advice from Grandpa on Save the Girls. This book is trying hard to at least put forward the idea that women are different from men, they require some understanding, and that girls should be valued as well. So they're trying very hard. They have a section on why children die and how to prevent that. So and the character of illegitimates. And it says that illegitimate children, because their parents drank stolen waters, are often lacking in moral balance. So certainly very judgmental in a Victorian way, but trying very hard to help people lead a better life. I just think it's a really interesting read. I'm going to start this at $19 and just see if someone else enjoys it as much as I have. I'd have to admit I've skimmed through several pages of it. The last book I have to show is this one, The ABC of Freemasonry, a book for beginners. And the reason I thought this was interesting is the ABCs of Freemasonry have been put out for many, many, many decades. Freemasonry has been around since the Masons were forming guilds in medieval England. So the Masonic groupings of fraternal orders are not a new thing by any stretch of the imagination. This particular one dates to 1921, and you can see it was a presentation piece with the seal there. And it's a very basic rundown for people, and this was published in 1921, this particular issue, and I just don't see old ones of this. I see newer ones. The Masons are somewhat secretive about their society, and because of that, they really don't like these things to be circulated all that much. They talk about depiction through symbols, the essence of true religion, and some other subjects that have become controversial as far as people outside of the Masons. And so you don't really see these books come up very often. And that's the reason I think that it's interesting. I'm starting this one at $14.99, and there are a lot of fraternal collectors. I think there are more fraternal collectors than there are Masons. I believe there's something like 2 million Masons left in the United States. I think there's more people than that who collect Masonic items. Next up, I just love this thing. I think it's so cool. This is by Marx. Marx Toys, you can see it right there on the gas pump, the MAR with the X in the back. That is Marx Toys. It says American made. These were made in the 1930s, these little gas stations. They had these islands by themselves. They also had complete gas stations. This one's in pretty good shape. There's a few little chips and it's been played with a little bit. It's got a minor bend in the out and in signs, although that's partly just the way they're made. But overall, it's in really good condition. I love the fact that it even has the place to put the battery, and it looks like it's pretty clean, which would make this little light up here glow. This was back in the era of visible oil and gas station pumps, and so that would have been a ball with the advertising for the company on it. And instead they put a light on it because they thought that'd be fun for kids. It's got the hose, it's got the signs, it's complete. That's very important with these. The overall condition is very good. I would say probably about a 7 on a 10-point scale. It's got a few little rubs and chips, but no real corrosion or rust, no big surface wear. It is an interesting story. Louis Marx started his toy company in 1919, and he wanted to make things less expensively than the heavy cast iron toys and things that were a little easier for kids to play with and not so heavy. So he started doing stamped tin, but he was really big on quality. He used tin lithography to do his stuff, and it really took off. And he actually kind of put a lot of the cast iron toy makers out of business as a result. By 1955, Louis Marx was on the cover of Time magazine, and his big quote was that our quality is not negotiable. And so Marx toys were considered to be very well made compared to their counterparts. He ended up doing very well in life, owning a big fancy mansion. Eventually, Marx toys had to switch from tin to plastics, and the toy that they made that was their big seller in 1969 was the Big Wheel, which was a plastic tricycle. I remember loving my Big Wheel when I was a little kid. And that was a Marx product as well. Marx did really well until Marx retired and they sold the company. I believe it went to Quaker Oats. They didn't really know what to do with it. It kind of got run into the ground, and by 1980, Marx toys were no more. This is actually a pretty valuable piece. I will start at around $100. It should sell for between there and $150. And that brings us to our final item, or I should say final collection of items. I was at an estate and had the opportunity to buy a number of items that individually maybe don't amount to a whole lot, but collectively tell a story about somebody who had no heirs. Their story would vanish if we didn't preserve it in this way. So I was really glad to find all the pieces, be able to put it together and present it to you. The fellow's name was Arthur Book. And he was the superintendent of the printing department for the Prairie Farmer. This is the Indiana edition of the Prairie Farmer, which I believe is still produced in Illinois, and I think that's primarily where it's distributed now. Prairie Farmer is the oldest publication, periodical, still in print in the United States. It's been around since 1841. This is a 1928 edition, And as the superintendent of the printing department, he would have been given these when they came out so that he could make sure that the printing process was being done correctly. This one's December 15th, 1928. It's got a wonderful old truck on the cover, and this attempt at some sort of colorization. But it also has great graphics, great advertising. Here's the Caro corn syrup. In 1941, they had their centennial, and they put out this very special centennial edition. Now, the Prairie Farmer I showed you, they sell for about $15 online. I haven't seen the centennial edition available anywhere. I think this is actually rather hard to get. This is January of 1941. More power for the American farmer, but you see this great Art Deco graphic here where you've got the city and the skyscrapers behind, and here's the farm that allows the people in the city to live. It also has some wonderful advertising graphics in here. For example, the Massey Harris tractor ad. I just think this is a neat publication, and again, he was the superintendent of printing, so that's how he would have come to have this. But there's other things that went along with that too. In 1933 at the Chicago World's Fair, Prairie Farmer had a float in the parade down at the Century of Progress, which you can see here. The Century of Progress, Chicago 1933. There's the official photographer. This is an official press photo from the 1933 World's Fair. They also let him have a pass to the World's Fair, and here is his pass with his picture, so we actually have a photo of him with his ID card, employee of the exhibitor Prairie Farmer Publishing Company. So since they were exhibiting at the Chicago World's Fair, he was able to come and go because he had dispensation. And you can see the October Century of Progress with the little stubs there that they can poke out. And that's in its original little folio there. Prairie Farmer is still in production today, probably because at one point they bought a radio station, which they eventually sold and made a lot of money, because Prairie Farmer had a bunch of radio programs that they would broadcast on WLS. That's why they got the radio station in the first place. So this spoon is a souvenir. Souvenir spoons were very popular in the 1930s. This is made of silver plate. So that goes with the collection. You also see the WLS logo on this key fob. And you can see where their headquarters were on West Washington Boulevard, Chicago 7, Illinois. And on the back, Prairie Farm readers are the most informed agricultural people in the world. Here is an advertising ruler for Prairie Farmer to get people to advertise. It's saying there's more than 200,000 circulation weekly. There's a little bit of a loss on the edge of that. But there's their building in Chicago, our new home. So this was the place they had just moved. And on the back it says, always a good rule, advertise in Prairie Farmer. And then the last piece of the collection that really brings his career full circle is when he retires. Now, some people get a silver watch when they retire. He got a silver cowbell. And it says on it, it's a little smudgy, presented to Arthur Buch on the occasion of his retirement after 29 years of loyal and faithful service, Prairie Farmer WLS, January 1, 1956. So he worked there for the better part of his career, had a great career there, left us a great little grouping of items from his career there. These were obviously important things to him. I know, like I said, that the publication sells for about $15 online. I am curious to see what the whole grouping together will sell for, because it's just so fun to me to see the collection effect where you have multiple items that relate to one topic in a collection. And sometimes that means that the items sell for more together than they would separately. I'm curious to see who will be interested in this man's story and willing to preserve it for future generations. So that is the reason that I'm selling all of those items as one lot. That lot is going on eBay right now if you are watching this video as it comes out. If not, you can follow up by looking at the Antique Nomad on eBay to see if it's still available, to see whether these other items are still available, to bid if you're interested, to follow the bids or the closed prices if you want to know how these things actually do. I will come back next month with the video talking about how these things actually did on eBay. And I just want to thank you all so much for joining me. It's really fun to bring you these 20 items every month. I like telling the stories behind them. It's fun to see how they do on eBay. It's interesting to see how these quirky and unusual items will fare when they're presented to the entire global market. And we'll just see how they do. And I will see you again soon somewhere in the world of antiques and vintage. I'm George the Antique Nomad, and we'll see you later.
Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below, click the bell to be notified when new videos upload, leave a comment below, and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.